Today we're going to talk about what to do when your ex goes back to their ex. And if you stick around until the very end of this video, not only am I going to show you how to determine if you're in one of those situations where you're the rebound, but also what to do if you find yourself in that situation. But without a doubt, the number one burning question that most people have when they find themselves in this exact situation is, what are my overall chances of getting them back? It's important to determine this question, or the answer to this question rather, so you don't really waste your time going after a situation that you really have no business doing that in. Luckily for you, I've put together a special quiz on my website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, that's designed to answer this question for you. It will give you an approximate idea of what your chances are and some of the next steps you should be taking going forward. So if you want to take this quiz, it's free and it should only take you about 1 to 2 minutes to complete. And all you have to do if you want to take it is simply look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on it. It's that simple. So you're afraid because your ex went back to their ex. Usually in situations like this, the first thing I encourage people to do is to determine if they are the rebounds for their ex. Often I've done videos and articles and podcast episodes where I'm talking about your ex going on the rebound from you. But let's put the shoe on the other foot here and assume that maybe you're the rebound to your ex. How do you know that? Well, there are really two data points that you need to be looking at. How quickly your ex moved on from their past relationship to you, and also if your relationship followed the 4 phases of a rebound relationship. Let's start at the top. How quickly did your ex move on from their previous relationship to you? As a general rule of thumb, in order for you to be considered a rebound to your ex needs to have moved on very quickly from their past relationship. But let's define what quickly looks like. Generally speaking, we're looking at a relationship being moved on from within a week to a month. You can kind of fall in that range then. But also, you kind of need to take note of how long that past relationship was, but more on that in a second. Let's move on to our next data point, the 4 phases of the rebound relationship. So without a doubt, one of my most popular YouTube videos here on YouTube was my video on the 4 phases of a rebound relationship. Generally speaking, I argue that every rebound relationship will go through 4 phases. The first phase is a little mini honeymoon period. We've all been in a relationship where everything is candy and roses. This would often be considered the honeymoon period. That is the first phase that most rebound relationships will go through. The second phase is where the cracks begin to form. Often this occurs when you have your first argument. And sometimes arguing can occur very early on and the honeymoon period is shortened. It's just every relationship is different. The third phase is the fight or flight phase. So this is kind of an interesting one. When the cracks begin to form in your relationship with your ex will either argue with you an extreme amount, or they will fly away. They will literally run away and just skip the 4th step altogether. But most of the time we find that most exes will just fight with you. So remember, it's not about the cracks beginning to form. In this phase, it's more about how frequently they're arguing with you and fighting with you. Now, the 4th phase is where they have an epiphany. This moment of clarity where they're sitting there and thinking, I made a mistake in this relationship. I should have went back to my previous one. I didn't know how good I had it. Now, the point of me filming this video and showing you these 4 phases is to give you an idea of what you should be looking out for. Most of the time when we enter into breakups, we kind of look at our situation with blinders on. We're afraid to look at the broad view. But if you do take a step back and look at the broad view of your relationship and you notice that your relationship fitted these 4 phases, you may have been indeed a rebound to your ex. So what's the next step? Let's say that you do determine that you are a rebound to your ex, and therefore it makes sense that he or she is going to go back to their previous relationship. What's next? What do you do? Well, I always recommend for my clients to take stock of their situation. And when I say this, I mean look at the good components and the bad components. And believe me, there are both, but there are usually more bad components than good components. Allow me to explain. Let's talk about the bad. So, when you're trying to get your ex back, if you take stock of your situation, in this particular situation where your ex has moved on back to their ex, there are 3 specific things that I want you to take note of. And if your situation has these 3 things, you are most likely not going to succeed. That's not to say that you can't succeed, but your chances are exponentially lower. So what are those 3 components? Well, number 1, we have your ex is still married to their ex. Oftentimes we'll get clients who sort of meet their ex on the rebound after him and his wife are separated. But the problem is that when your ex goes back to his wife, it's kind of hard to compete with that amount of history. But that's pretty much common sense. You usually shouldn't be trying to get an ex back that is married. The next one is a little bit more difficult to decide, and that is how long your ex has been with his ex for. So if you look at the totality of their relationship, if they've been together for something like 5, 6 to 10 years, that's hard to compete with, especially when you only have a small amount of your ex's attention for his relationship dating life. Think of it like this: your ex's ex has years of experience and time invested into that relationship, whereas maybe you only have 1 month. So your ex is obviously going to have a lot more history, some of it good, but also some of it bad. But usually it doesn't spell really great signs for you if you've only been with your ex for a month or something like that. And this next one is a little bit hard for you guys to hear, especially if you're in this situation, and that's if your ex actually cheated on his ex with you. Now, there are 2 main points that I want to leave you with here. The first one should be obvious, but you'd be surprised at how many people it's not obvious to them. And that's, if your ex is willing to cheat on his ex, what's gonna stop him from doing the same to you? That's a bit of a red flag. And secondly, do you want to be with a man that values women so low that he would cheat on them? Now, we've only been looking at the bad sort of red flags that you should be keeping an eye out for. That's not to say that there isn't a good flag that you should be keeping an eye out for. And in my opinion, there is one big good thing that you should keep your eyes peeled out for. So what is that good thing? Well, if your ex's ex is in an on-again, off-again relationship quite frequently, that can actually be an extremely good sign. One of the telltale signs that we've seen with on-again, off-again relationship is that there is their own phases within those on-again, off-again relationships. There's the on-again phase and the off-again phase. So what may be happening here is that your ex is in the off-again phase. Now, what may be happening here is that your ex is in the on-again phase where you were the off-again phase. So how do you sort of divert your ex's attention and make you the new master of relationships? Well, no matter what, the first thing that you should always be doing is actually extending your period of no contact. If you don't know what a no contact rule is, I encourage you to go read my articles on my website, listen to my podcast, or rather just watch some of the videos where I'm talking about it in this YouTube channel. But if you know about how I do things, I actually recommend 3 different types of no contact rules: the 21-day rule, the regular 30-day rule, and finally the 45-day rule. Now, we've experimented a lot with situations where your ex has moved on to their ex and trying to figure out exactly what is the ideal length of no contact. And what we found is that, contrary to popular belief, the 21-day rule and the 30-day rule are not as effective as the 45-day rule. Now, why is that? Well, quite frankly, it's because we think that the more time that you leave your ex with his ex, the more time there is for the cracks to begin to form, the fights to begin to happen, and eventually the off-again phase happens once again. But once that happens, what are you supposed to do? Well, that is where we implement something called the being there method. Now, this is the most morally gray situation that we actually do encounter here, because depending on your morals, it can be construed as a little bit in that gray area. So what is the being there method? Well, basically you're using your ex's girlfriend's insecurity against her. How do you do that? Just by simply being there. So after your 45-day no contact rule, you are going to essentially slowly and methodically compete for your ex's time so that he and you are often communicating, and the new girl is seeing that communication, growing insecure, blowing up her relationship, and voila, you have essentially forced a situation where he might start looking at you as a better candidate for a relationship than his current girlfriend. But of course, it's morally gray. So I'm not sitting here and telling you that you absolutely need to approach the situation. In fact, that's why I told you some of the red flags to look out for. If you have those red flags, you're probably better off not continuing to try to get your ex back. But if you do want to go forward, you don't necessarily have to do the being there method. You just simply have to do what you feel is right in your moral compass. I'm just here to show you what we found works. It's up to you to make the decision on whether or not you use it or not. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. If you haven't already, make sure you stop everything you're doing and take our Ex Recovery Chances quiz that I talked about at the beginning of this video. It's a simple 2-minute quiz designed to tell you what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back, and all you got to do is simply look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on it. It's that simple. Also, if you haven't liked, commented, or subscribed to our channel, please do that. We need you guys to do that. Bye.